All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to recommence on our next session on Industry Day. Hope you have been enjoying the sessions thus far. And so now we're honored to turn over to our next session. We are going to have Dr. Megan Clark, the director of the newly formed Australian Space Agency. When I say newly formed, it was actually at the IAC in Australia, in Adelaide last year, where all these announcements were made. And she will be interviewed by basically Dr. Pam Melroy, who is a celebrity in space in her own right, being a former astronaut and now actually working for Nova Systems in Australia, helping actually shape the future of the Australian space program. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Pam Melroy, who will interview Dr. Megan Clark. Thank you.
Thank you, Robbie. Thank you, Robbie. So I have to apologize. I have a slight case of laryngitis, and it was not because I went to a rave last night. But it's all about Megan anyway, so I'll just sit here and channel Kathleen Turner a little bit. And anyway, so happy to be here with you today, Megan, and I'm excited to have this chat and share some of the wonderful things that you have been doing with everybody here at IAC. So as Robbie said, the announcement was made a year ago at IAC, but the space agency itself did not form until the 1st of July. So how have the first 100 days been? What have you been doing?
Yeah, well, it's lovely to reflect back on a year ago in IAC, because many people here were there, and I can remember when it was announced and the entire room erupted. It was a very special moment, and it gave, I think, a wonderful buzz to international collaboration at IAC. Yeah, we're 12 weeks in. We've got a fabulous team that's working incredibly hard. Several of them here today, Joe Andrews and Carl Rodriguez, and also Anthony Murfitt with us. We've got Sarah Pierce working with us, who's here as well at IAC. I think what's completely blown us away has been the response of the Australian public. We've only got 25 million people in Australia, and we set ourselves some targets on how we wanted to engage with the public, and we blew those away literally in weeks. So even in the first 12 weeks, 20 million Australians have heard, seen, or read about the agency, and that was beyond our wildest expectation, and it really said to us that the nation wanted the agency. They were just completely behind what we were doing, and really engaged. It sent a wonderful message as well to our politicians.
Oh, that's great. I have also seen this incredible pent-up energy that's just exploded since you started. Everywhere, from industry and academia, students. It's very exciting to see. So you've had this great response from the Australian people. You've also signed an agreement recently with GNF just a couple of weeks ago, which is pretty good to get an international agreement signed in the first 90 days of the space agency. How have the other countries' space agencies interacted with you? How are they reacting?
It's great. We were really pleased when Jean-Yves came all the way to Sydney on a very, very busy schedule, and we signed our first agreement with GNF. GNF had been working very proactively in Australia. We'd already set up a concurrent design facility at University of New South Wales, where our teams could design literally in real time with the French teams. So it was already really extending a partnership that had existed. So that was really special for us. Literally, just before I came into this room, really pleased to announce that we've signed a cooperation agreement, MOU, with the United Kingdom. So the team there, and we're really progressing. I think when we looked at this area of international collaboration, we talk a lot about it, and I sort of personally remember sort of writing to the government and saying we need one door and one voice for Australia. But boy, now that we have the door, sort of saying we needed it and then realising just what we were missing out on in international collaboration, and the warmth with which the new agency has been received, and and we've now realised that we just were missing out, not having that voice, not having that single door to be able to engage internationally. And so it's been again reinforcing why this is so important, and I think reinforcing that Australian industry and Australian research needed that door. We needed to open that door to allow our industry to participate fully, to allow our researchers, to allow our young people to participate fully in this fantastic environment. So, and I can't really leave that question without personally thanking you. So when Commander Melroy decides that she's going to help the Australian nation build a space agency, it's one of the more delightful things that happens. So thank you, Commander Pam.
Megan. It's really been fun to be in Australia and to watch all the great work you're doing and try to help support you. So.
But what they don't know is, everyone likes constructive feedback. So when I get constructive feedback from Commander Melroy, it's very constructive, and my usual response back to her is orbital correction underway. So
yes.
Everybody needs that support and advice, and we really appreciate it.
Well, congratulations on signing the agreement with the UK, and we won't make you answer, but I'm guessing you have a couple of other international agreements in works.
Yeah, we do, and I'd love to be able to announce those, but we need to complete those in the next few days.
Great, fantastic. We'll be looking for more news, watching Twitter closely. So we've talked about the Australian public. We've talked about other agencies. How about industry? Australian industry, international industry. What kind of, how are they reacting? How are they engaging?
It's a great question, because we've set the purpose of the agency to completely transform the Australian space industry and also to grow our industry. So we've set our purpose to be very commercially focused. We're the most industry focused agency in the world. And partly we're late to this game. We're small, we don't have a lot of money, so you need to focus. But we also see in the new space that it really is about building that commercial area. So a couple of things. We're engaging directly with industry as well, so through agencies in joint missions, but also working directly with industry. And we're asking industry the question, how are you going to help us build this new era for Australia? What's your contribution? So whilst industry is very focused on its competitive advantage and building its business, the question we're asking industry is, in a non-competitive area, non-competitive areas, how can you help build our R&D connections? How can you help collaborate? How can you also help our young people and invest in our training and our education in these areas which are non-competitive? And we've been really pleased with this sense. I think we get the sense in industry that industry says to us, if we don't support the Australian agency, it's not a given that it will be successful. Australia's tried a couple of times in the past to do this, and they were not successful. Sort of rose up, fell away. So out of frustration and out of a sense of it's not an automatic given that something like this will be a success, we're definitely feeling that industry wants us to be successful because they know it's in their interest as well. So all the way through from our startup community, as you know, we have a vibrant startup community. You've been part of that, and we're starting to see capital come in internationally to support that, through our companies that want to be in the bigger supply chains, through to the major players who also recognise that the Australian market, our mining, our agriculture, our oil and gas, our big industries, these are potential customers as well for the use of space in automation, in robotics, in transforming their industries as well, in complete new ways of communicating. So we're really pleased with the engagement that we've had with industry.
So Megan, I want to pull on that statement about being really industry focused, and maybe you can just talk for a moment about some of the targets that you've set for yourself around that industry focus.
Sure. Our industry right now is around $4 billion a year, and we want to well and truly blow through tripling that by 2030, and so that will increase our share. We don't have a large share of the global market, so 0.8, 0.9%. And yet, as a country, we have a much larger footprint for our, the size of our GDP. And we've also set some targets on inbound capital. The only thing that really stimulates new industry is the investment of inbound capital. It's just such an underpinning driver for growth. So we've set ourselves some aggressive targets in the short term, very short term, of over $1 billion of inbound capital into Australia. So we really want to transform and kickstart this industry, and we know it doesn't necessarily just come from the investment that an agency itself comes. It really comes from attracting others to choose Australia. We've had some fabulous recent announcements. So Airbus has chosen Australia to be the launch and retrieval site, the first global launch and retrieval site for the Zephyr high altitude pseudo satellite. Also chosen Adelaide, where you've been living, to now be the control for one of their Skynet satellites for the Asia Pacific region. Wonderful choices for us. Citayel, the Italian satellite manufacturer, has just chosen Australia to establish manufacturing up to 300 kilograms. These are the sort of decisions that I'd love to be able to say more of those. We want to see industry choosing Australia. We want to see other countries choosing Australia as a partner.
Wow, that is fantastic. Yeah, there's a very vibrant startup community that I've seen in Australia, and it just amazes me the amount of energy that's particularly coming out of students graduating and starting companies. And I think the venture capital community is trying to step up to the plate with that too. It's exciting.
I think most of them have me on speed dial. So so it's interesting, the phone calls that you get at 2 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon with a startup CEO going, I need to do this pitch for this company, and I'm standing on the back deck with the dog wanting to be fed and going, yep, I think you got it. Yep, have you got your technical specs? I'm going, this is crazy, this is, but it's wonderful that we've got a small and vibrant community, and as I said, you've been doing a lot to support that. And you've got the upcoming trade mission to the US. So Pam's leading an upcoming trade mission for us. So you're certainly doing lots to help.
Yeah, I think it'll be really important to create those partnerships. And I was going to ask you how you felt about these international agreements that you've been signing, and how you're hoping that will create partnerships in industry as well.
Yeah, it's a really good question. We might be small and we don't have a lot of money, but we're not limiting our vision to be partner on joint missions. We want to see Australian technology out there. We want Australians to be really proud of what we can do as a country. So we accept that we certainly don't have the funding yet to be leading major missions, but we absolutely have the creativity, the entrepreneurship. We kind of got a bit of a can-do attitude too, to be a fantastic partner internationally as well. We've got some wonderful geographic advantages. We look into the solar system. This helps. And of course, we host both the European Space Agency and NASA Deep Space Communication Centres, one on each side of the country. But we're also a wonderful location for connecting more broadly between space and Earth. So we want to make full advantage of that, and we've got places where it doesn't rain, so that's good for lasers as well. So even in the optical side, we've got some spots where it'd be fantastic to bring a laser down if you need to. So all of those advantages, we want to build on our advantages, and it's not just about what's good for Australia. We take our responsibility globally very seriously. So how do we be a responsible citizen for operating safely and securely in space? How does Australia step up and help the world with some of the deep challenges? And we can't do everything, but we figured that certainly one of the areas where we can be a responsible global citizen is in space debris, and making sure that all of us can operate safely and securely in space, and to promote a rules-based order for space. So as I said, we're focused much more broadly just on our industry, and we take our global responsibilities very seriously.
Yeah, I've noticed that there seem to be a lot of startup companies and some more mature companies very interested in space surveillance. And I think, having that geographic advantage, there's a key role in debris detection that could be played. And I'm hearing a lot of that also. There's also that policy piece of it, though. Australia has to take your place at the table with the UN and be able to talk about some of those sustainability initiatives. And have you spent some time thinking about that?
Well, luckily we've got, in Australia we have Steve Freeland, who's been working very constructively with the UN. Steve looked at our whole regulatory piece in Australia and led a review into that, and just in August we managed to pass the revision to our laws, so building on all of the work that Stephen did to modernise our laws. And we're one of only 18 countries, we're signatory to all of the United Nations multilateral treaties on operating safely in space. So we have a role to play, and Stephen's extremely well respected in that United Nations community. Alex and Etta as well in our team are very well known. So we don't have a lot of people, but we have some fantastic people.
So you've gotten a lot done in the short term to start to knit your community together. Thinking longer term about some of the larger initiatives that are going forward, things like the Lunar Orbiting Platform, do you think that Australia's deep expertise in remote asset management, is that something that you think you could play a role on the broader exploration stage with?
It's a great question. One of the slides I actually have is of the control room in Perth, for which is the major control room for an area called the Pilbara, where we have ports and rail and facilities. We have the largest robot in the world, which is the automated rail system, and I'm talking an area that is bigger than the entire United Kingdom. This is a region, and that entire infrastructure, everything from the mining, from the automated trucks, as I said, all the automated rail to the port, is all controlled 1,500 kilometres away. So massive control room, very few people actually on site. So when you think about that, that's almost the same as operating a control room for the moon, or operating a control room in the orbiter. So we see this as a real opportunity to leverage Australia's world-leading capacity in remote asset management. Actually, pretty well everything in Australia is remote when it comes down to it. So if you're outside Sydney or Melbourne, Perth or Adelaide, it starts to get remote very quickly. And so we needed to be very good at this. We think we can leverage that, but importantly, we want to bring down what we're learning in space about how to operate remotely and bring that down to make our industries more competitive. And that's already happening. So one of our oil companies, Woodside, is partnering with NASA on the development of Robonauts. So there's 8 Robonauts. Robonauts are torso up, very dexterous robot who I understand is quite happy to hold a spanner for like 2 hours. So some real advantages of having a robot help you with maintenance. And if you're maintaining an offshore oil platform with its complexity and its short space and having to work in a difficult environment, and real risk of getting your engineers to helicopter off-site. It's a little bit different to orbiting up to the station, but you can see the similarities of doing maintenance there as doing maintenance on the ISS. And so this is a beautiful and natural partnership between Australian industry and NASA, and we see that simply progressing. Interesting, I visited the Woodside team, and they said, we need to get our people used to the fact that they are going to be working alongside robots. So I can't, well, what do you mean get used to? And they said, well, we've now got just little robots that go along all the corridors, just so everybody gets used to the fact. So they don't do, he says, no, they just wander the corridors, but we want all of our employees to emotionally get used to the fact that there's a robot.
Well, at least they could bring you coffee or
I
something.
know.
you'd think. Yeah, I don't know.
Sure. Don't worry. I'm sure the employees have figured out all sorts of things to do. But it was an interesting comment. We need to get all of our team used to working alongside a robot.
Okay, so
Fascinating.
could it be possible, you know how you can change your GPS to different accents? So at some point, are we going to have a remote assistant on the lunar orbiting platform with an Australian accent? You ask them to hold the spanner and they say, "No worries, mate," right?
Well, we've already got Andrea Boyd with an Aussie accent
That's
talking
right.
to the operations control and working at ESA. So we've got Aussie accents all over the place. We want to bring some of them home, and we want to send some of them out there to infiltrate. So do not be surprised when you hear Commander, when you hear an Aussie accent. Don't be fearful, and don't be surprised.
I think everyone loves an Australian accent, Megan. That's not going to be a problem. That'll be a help.
Yours is coming along, by the way.
Thank you. I'm working on it. So, for those of you who don't know Megan very well, she's had an amazing career in industry, as a scientist, as an entrepreneur, and working with venture capital, and also heading up CSIRO, which is the Australian premier research organization, like the National Science Foundation in the United States. You're on several boards. You've had this incredible career. What inspired you to take on the space agency?
Oh, I just didn't take a step back fast enough, Pam. So I think when the nation asks you to do something, it's kind of hard to say no. So it sounds kind of hokey, but I deeply like to support what my nation's doing and to be part of that. So if you can put your shoulder to the grindstone to support what your country does, I think it's really good. As a kid, my dad never did any parenting, I have to say, but maybe one of the moments of parenting he did do was he took us out on the front lawn and actually was Sputnik. So I mean, I just have a very vague memory of this. And he looked up and he says, "That's the future." And so we used to spend a lot of time laying on the beach, trying to count satellites and stuff. And I still get a kick out of that. I go out to the balcony. I look at the time when the ISS is gonna rise, and we watch it boom, because it goes so fast, boom, across the sky, and it still gets me that there's people there, just to be able to look up. So I look forward to the day that we can look at the Lunar Gateway, and watch it, and I look forward to knowing that there'll be people there. So, it's been fantastic knowing, that you've been up there as well. Hugely inspiring to all of us. So, and I'm happy to do my little bit.
So what's been most fun about IAC? I mean, we're day 2, but it's pretty exciting standing on the stage with all the other heads of agencies. And what's been fun?
That's just daunting. What was exciting? Yeah, it just makes you nervous. What was exciting was actually when we opened the booth here, because the first time that Australia's had an Australian Space Agency, first time we've had that represented. We didn't just make it the agency, we tried to make it the whole country and represent everything that we're doing. What really was exciting was all of a sudden there was just all these Aussies walking around going, "We've got a booth." So something really simple, but to see the look on their faces, and they were all kind of, and there was a real pride, so that was, to me, that's a moment that I won't forget.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So, I can see a few people in the audience nodding, but thinking back to IAC, obviously the announcement was great, but the moment that sits in my head was Michael Davis had been the chair of the industry advisory. I'm going to get this wrong. Space Industry Association of Australia. I better get that right because Michael will kill me. And Michael had been helping us, and SIAA had been a tremendous driver to get an agency. Working for a long, long time, over a decade, and the announcement was kept quite tight, and And of course, we knew it was going to happen. And I can remember Michael was on the phone. I thought, I'm not sure who he's talking to, but this is a big moment. So, I wanted to give him a hug. So I gave up and gave him a hug and a kiss. And he was doing live Radio National across the country. And so he had to say, I'm sorry, I just, got a hug from, the chair. So those little moments, those little personal moments when so many people have worked so hard to make something happen is special.
So Megan, is there anything that you're concerned about? Is there what's on your radar screen that you're trying to make sure stays on rails?
You want my problems?
Yeah.
The responsibility that we have with the agency team. The Australian Space Agency needs continuity. It's one thing to get something started, but you need to have continuity. It absolutely needs to have clout, and we need to earn the respect and trust of our partners. And if we're really going to participate, it really does need to be that catalyst that can help the whole country. These are the responsibilities that sit quite hard on my shoulders. And then when I talk to the young, the students who all see, every student I speak to seems to be launching a rocket, and then they tell me they're launching it from their uncle's farm or something, and then I just go, have you got your licenses? I worry about being safe on Earth and safe in space, and the team operating safely. So those are the things that I think really sit on my shoulders as well at 3:00 in the morning. So, but I don't talk about those things.
Yeah, no, it makes sense though, having that safety responsibility, which not all space agencies do. Sometimes they divide up the regulatory responsibilities, but having that safety responsibility is a big thing for the growth of the industry, so that makes sense. Well, you have a room full of people here who are excited about Australia joining the rest of the community with the space agency. So you've got a variety of people here from Australian industry, from international industry, academia, government. How can they help you? What can they do? Should they follow you on Twitter? What do you?
Right. Yeah. You've got decisions to make. You've got choices to make around the world, and I certainly would just encourage to think about Australia as the partner. Choose Australia when you're thinking about that. We absolutely stand ready and open to work collaboratively and constructively to encourage decisions that really are going to grow our industry and transform us. Don't underestimate, I think, the capacity, the creativity, the intellectual capacity, the training of our young people, their capacity to be able to support. Don't underestimate that ability. When I speak to international companies and other companies, they say, we're just blown away, and we go and see what the Australians can do. We can contribute, and we certainly want to be able to support you in making the decisions. And we know you've got choices to go anywhere in the world. So come down under.
That's great. That's wonderful. Well, I think we have a few extra minutes. I don't know if there's any questions from the audience that we can take. Is anybody interested in asking a question of Megan? I see a hand back there. If you'll.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you, Pamela. Many years ago, I asked questions to Brad Biddington and Michael Davis because at that moment, they are my only friends from Australian space. So now you are the head of the Australian Space Agency, and at that year, I raised a proposal to set up an international launch site on the western coast of Australia, because you know that the recovery of the Falcon 9 on the sea is quite difficult. To land it on the land will waste half of the energy. So with a very natural trajectory, to land on the inland of Australia is not heavily populated, so it will save most of the energy, and also it will be very safe because it's not heavily populated, and on the western coast, it will be convenient for the other countries to ship the rocket to that port. Do you think it is a good idea? Thank you.
I'm struggling to find the question, but But your comment on launch, of course, is an important one, and it was interesting. There were certainly two views across the nation. One view was, of course, we need launch. There's a new market coming. We need to be part of that. And then there was another view that said, well, there's actually launch facilities being developed in other countries, and we can certainly make use of that. I think the answer lies actually in a combination of those. We certainly would see that commercial reality and an order book for launch is going to be the most essential part of a commercial entity making the decision to have launch. And I'm talking about rocket launch. We also have now the possibility of suborbital flight in terms of simply taking off from a runway. And we have opportunities for that. We're a fabulous location for suborbital flight. And of course, we have the high altitude pseudo satellites where you can simply run along the runway and send those beautifully up to 20 kilometers. So even launch itself now has a series of elements. I think it would be fair to say that we would see the commercial drivers being the most important ones rather than taxpayer investment. And we're having some fantastic discussions around that. From the agency's point of view, we've got to make sure that our international obligations are clear. We would have the licensing obligations of the countries that are around us, all of those aspects, and we will take responsibility for that. And we recognise that we need to get cracking and get this work done early on in the agency to be able to support those discussions on launch.
Good. Yeah, I'm glad we had the opportunity to talk about launch. You're right, that's important. I think there was a question over here that I saw over...
Hi, Dr. Clark. I'm very excited as Australian, and I'm sure a lot of us are. We talked a lot about industry today, so I was just wondering if you could comment on what your thoughts, the role the big primes such as Lockheed or Boeing could play in comparison to SMEs and startups.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
So the role of big prime companies such as Lockheed and Boeing in this in comparison to SMEs and startups?
Yeah, it's a great question. We certainly want to build the sovereign capability, both in small and medium and ultimately large Australian companies operating in space. It's also very important to be part of the value chains of the larger companies in terms of getting onto that international realm. And we're also seeing the larger companies being really important in actually building the industry itself through their venture capital arms, through investments in research and development. So Boeing, for example, building their virtual reality research centre in Queensland and supporting a company like Opaque Space, which working with Boeing on virtual reality training for docking, and also now broadening that up to NASA partnership directly. So that there's a wonderful example of taking a company that had come out of one of our universities and ricocheting them into a global supply chain. So we welcome that, and of course we welcome, as I said, the recent investment of Lockheed Martin into supporting the CSIRO venture capital fund, Main Sequence Ventures, which certainly has space as part of its remit. So they're just a couple of examples, but we're seeing the large companies supporting research, supporting students, supporting internships, as well as the real commercial aspects. So they're very much part of that whole ecosystem, and you need the whole ecosystem to be healthy.
So true, absolutely. Well, we've run a little over our time, but I did have one question for the audience. Can all the proud Australians here today raise your hand so that Megan can see how many of you are here? Oh, that's wonderful. That's fantastic. That's great to see you here. That's really wonderful.
No, that's
Well,
fantastic.
let's extend a thanks to Megan for her leadership of the brand new Australian Space Agency and uh, exciting times and wishes to hear what's going to happen a year from now. So thank you, Megan.
No, well, really, it's just the team. It's we've got fantastic people, and you know, our team is extraordinary. So, you know, real shout out to them, not to
All
me.
of you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben.